is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Nigerians get ready for election day. The UN calls for more support for a newly signed peace deal in the Central African Republic. And reports of worsening hunger in South Sudan despite the peace deal. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. And with me is Uche Okoronkwo with a preview of your business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Zimbabwe's central bank governor under fire for exchanging exporters' US dollar earnings. And lawmakers block a merger between Kenya Airways and Kenya's Airports Authority. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it's back to Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. Well, let's start the hour in Nigeria, where the country's Independent National Electoral Commission is making final preparations for the national elections on Saturday. INEC has briefed its officers and dispatched voting materials to tens of thousands of polling stations across the country. Large numbers of Nigerians are also traveling across the country for the second time in a week to cast their votes. Presidential elections were postponed from February 16th by a week, and now it's only hours before polling stations officially open. This is the third straight election to be pushed to a later date. Presidential polls in 2011 and 2015 were also delayed over logistics and security challenges. President Muhammadu Buhari faces a tight contest against former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, the main opposition candidate. Well, let's get the very latest for you now. CGTN's Robert Nagila is standing by with more from Lagos. Robert, of course, it's just a matter of hours now before Nigerians go to the polls. Is it safe to say that it's all systems go?
Well, the Electoral Commission says that it has sorted out all the challenges, all the logistical issues that forced it to postpone the election by a week. It says all the card readers have been configured countrywide, and it also says that it expects all polling stations to open their doors at 8 o'clock on Saturday, which is tomorrow, and for voters to begin taking part in this voting exercise. That process expected to carry on until about 2 p.m. when the polling stations will then shut their doors. However, I hasten to add that those who are still lining up within the precinct or the polling station waiting to vote at 2 p.m. will still be allowed to vote. So at this particular moment, as you said, as far as the Electoral Commission is concerned, it is all systems go. Lindy?
Well, that is certainly good to hear, Robert. And I wonder if voters are convinced. We know, of course, after last week's disappointment, many were concerned. Well, there is now great concern that voter turnout might be low. What's the latest on that?
Well, the issue of voter turnout has continued to be a major concern ever since the postponement of the elections a week ago, and still is a concern up until this particular moment. You will recall that there were hundreds of thousands of people who had registered in far-flung areas and were had to travel to those areas where they had registered so that they could participate in the voting exercise. Now, what the authorities in Nigeria have done is declared Friday a public holiday to enable people to be able to travel to their respective polling stations, that is where they had registered as voters. Now, the Electoral Commission says that as of yesterday, Thursday, about 72 million Nigerians had collected their voters' cards. That represents about 86% of the 84 million registered voters in this country. That also means, however, and this is a bit of a concern, that about 11 million Nigerians, that's 11 million Nigerians, had yet to collect their voters' cards as of yesterday. Now, they're yet to get the latest figures from the Electoral Commission, but gives you an idea of what sort of figures we are dealing with at this particular moment. Now, the Electoral Commission says that, I beg your pardon, we will be able to have a really good idea from the Electoral Commission as to how many people will turn out in the coming days. However, by late Saturday afternoon, those on the ground like us journalists should have a pretty good idea in terms of turnout. But in terms of figures, we'll have to wait for the Electoral Commission. Lindy?
And of course, there is some concern, Robert, that voters may be deterred by security issues. You know, of course, over the past few weeks, we've seen a couple of flare-ups of security concerns. What is government's assurance for tomorrow as far as safety and security is concerned?
Well, security is another major concern all over the country. However, authorities believe that they have taken adequate measures to ensure the smooth, to ensure that this electoral exercise, the voting exercise and the entire electoral exercise will carry on smoothly. Now, tens of thousands of police officers have been deployed across the entire country. And to give you an idea of the enormity of this exercise, we're talking about more than 119,000 polling stations countrywide. Now, all these polling stations will require some sort of security presence there to ensure that the exercise runs smoothly. From what the police are telling us, these polling stations will be manned by the police. However, they will be able to call on the military as backup if they are needed. But at this particular moment, they feel that they have they've taken all the adequate measures required to ensure a smooth process. Now, we're also expecting a curfew at midnight Saturday, running up to about 4 p.m. Saturday local time. This is to ensure security for those participating in this process. We also expect Nigeria's land borders to be shut for the next 48 hours, beginning later tonight. So authorities believe that they've taken adequate measures, and as of now, they say that as far as they're concerned, people can go about their normal business, can go about the electoral process, voting, and if they want to stay at the polling stations, they can do that, but they need to do that peacefully, or they can go home and wait for the results to begin coming out once the voting exercise is complete. Lindy.
Thank you so much, Robert Nagila, joining us there from Lagos. And of course, we will be keeping in touch with him and our team on the ground as Nigerians go to the polls tomorrow morning. Well, of course, it is a busy election weekend. Senegal goes to the polls this Sunday in a presidential contest. The country's incumbent president, Macky Sall, will compete with 4 other candidates for the top seat. Sall comes up against 2 political heavyweights and 2 fresh aspirants. Ex-Prime Minister Idrissa Seck and former Foreign Affairs Minister Madické Niang will be the main threats. The current president is seeking his final 5-year mandate. The 57-year-old is expected to win the vote after his 2 most formidable opponents were barred from contesting due to allegations of graft. Residents in Senegal are eager to cast their vote and elect a suitable leader.
This is not our first time to take care of election in this country. We're used to it, so no problem. We're waiting for the date to come, and everybody's going to vote. You know, before election, a lot of talk going in the city because of, you know, diversity of opinion. You know, but when time comes, like to choose one, you're going to choose a president, and that's it. No problem.
Well, CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa is following developments in Senegal. She joins us now live from the capital, Dakar. Wilkista, just talk us through, or she joins us on the line rather. Of course, the Senegalese go to the polls on Sunday. Just give us an update as to what the country's electoral body is saying about its preparedness to carry out a free and fair election.
Thank you, Lindy. Now, the country's electoral commission has just held a briefing. It was briefing delegates from ECOWAS about the progress that it has made so far in the preparations and the president of the Electoral Commission did say that they are ready, that everything is set, and that they have taken steps to ensure that everything will go smoothly on Sunday when the country goes to the polls. So they're saying that the materials are ready. They're saying that they have ensured there's sufficient security, and that they do believe that it will be a free and fair election, and that voters will not encounter any problems when they go to the polls on Sunday. So you can see, like right now, even today is the very last campaign day. Up until the very last minute, it's almost evening where we are, and really just preparations are ongoing to ensure that this happens on course. Lindy.
Now, of course, we know that the incumbent President Macky Sall is the front runner, but talk us through how the political campaigns have been carried out. As you say, they'll be going on until the very last minute.
Sorry, Lindy, I can't hear you very clearly. Would you please take that again?
Just tell us a little bit more about how political campaigns have been carried out, even though, of course, we know that Macky Sall is the front runner in the election.
Yes, we have seen just campaigns in parts of the city, posters going up. We have seen different groups meeting. Yesterday evening, there was a campaign rally by the incumbent Macky Sall, and he is expected to have his last rally today. I would say that so far, it has seemed that everybody has had a fair chance to just get their message out, because we did see today the youngest contender in the race, that is Osman Sonko, 44 years old, was also holding a rally the same day that the incumbent was holding his. And it seems largely peaceful, because the supporters of Macky Sall were on one side, and it did seem that Osman had his rally was to have his rally in a different location. So I would say that it has been largely peaceful. There have been pockets of unrest. Like yesterday, we did see that there were a few university students who were out on the streets, but that was quickly quelled, and the police moved in very fast. But largely, I would say that there hasn't been much incident. There has been a bit of unrest, but not too much. And so we were also able to speak to Amnesty International, who say that they did hope that there wouldn't be any violence experienced on the day of the voting, and that the results are expected within 72 hours. So we will also be hoping that that will also be done in a peaceful fashion. Lindy.
Well, Kista Nyaboy, thank you very much. Joining us on the line from Dakar, Senegal. And of course, we will be keeping in touch with her throughout this weekend. Now, casting an eye to future elections, let's go to Uganda now. The country's ruling party has endorsed President Yoweri Museveni as their candidate for the 2021 presidential poll. The decision was taken by the party's executive during a retreat in western Uganda, but still needs sign-off from party delegates at a conference. President Museveni would be fighting for a 6th term in office. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga has more.
Another election is coming, and the ruling party is already close to deciding its candidate. Members of the National Resistance Movement's Central Executive Committee have agreed President Yoweri Museveni's sole candidature.
All we want is our grip to power. We can't just give up power, just like that. And if we have a good person who is likable, who has brought this country thus far, why should we let him go?
But some party members are not happy with this move. They say there should be a more open approach on who the party's flag bearer will be. Mr. Museveni's candidacy still needs to be signed off by party delegates at a conference in November. He's been in power since 1986, having contested and won all 5 previous elections. Last year, lawmakers scrapped the presidential age limit of 75 years, which would have blocked him from running again. With less than 2 years to the presidential polls, political parties are already selecting their flag bearers, and there could be new contenders emerging. MP Robert Kyagulanyi, also known as musician Bobby Wine, has declared his intentions to run for the presidency. Other opposition parties say they are ready to compete as well.
To us in the opposition, we are prepared to encounter Museveni in whichever form he comes. And I can tell you,
that for now we are more prepared than ever before. Whether they bring Museveni or not, the other preoccupation that we are going to be on as Ugandans and as members of the opposition is to ensure that we work on leveling the ground.
Uganda's opposition is pushing for electoral reforms ahead of the 2021 elections. They want an independent electoral commission constituted. But as the clock ticks down to 2021, political strategists are beginning to draw up plans to secure the public's votes. Hilary Isiga, CGTN, Kampala.
Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Coming up, Kenya's High Court postpones a ruling on anti-gay laws. And a tougher law increases penalties on wildlife trafficking in Uganda.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
Come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The outgoing United Nations representative to the Central African Republic is calling for support for the recently signed peace deal. Speaking while briefing the UN Security Council, Parfait Onanga Anyanga said the peace deal is a turning point for the Great Lakes nation.
Earlier this month, different armed groups involved in the conflict in Central African Republic signed a peace agreement in the Sudanese capital, Khartoum. A move welcomed across the board. The UN representative for CAR, however, says while a turning point for the country, a lot more support will be needed to ensure the deal holds.
L'accord du 6 février exprime clairement.
The February 6th Accord clearly expresses the will of Central Africans to renew their social contract, to reaffirm their profound aspiration for their coexistence in peace and in their rich diversity, to lower the tensions and to create conditions for rebuilding their country on healthy foundations. To create a country where re-emergence of violence as an instrument of conquest or preservation of power is banned forever.
The peace deal will see the establishment of a commission that will review justice issues. Members of the various armed groups will also be absorbed into a national army.
We require support of the Security Council to adopt MINUSCA's mandate because I don't want a parallel situation on the ground tomorrow. We want the work of these special units to fall under the authority of the government, but to also come under the direct and daily control of the MINUSCA so that we don't have any unproductive incidents on the ground.
The Central African Republic needs now more than ever the help of the Security Council. Government leaders as well as the population await a strong signal for the implementation and support of the peace agreement. All the more so because a window of opportunity created by the signing of the agreement would quickly close because of the upcoming presidential and legislative elections of 2020 and 2021.
It is hoped that the latest efforts will end years of conflict that has reigned in the Central African Republic since 2012. Violence that has often taken a religious angle and seen many lose their lives and a quarter of the population displaced. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Meanwhile, the United Nations has expressed concern over the food situation in South Sudan. The humanitarian body says the hunger situation has reached alarming levels. This despite the peace deal signed 6 months ago. It says nearly a fifth more people now need food aid to survive than when a famine was declared in 2017. The South Sudanese government and aid agencies are appealing for more support to avert a potential catastrophe.
In January 2019, an estimated 6.17 million people, or 54% of the population, were facing crisis, that is IPC phase 3, acute food insecurity or waste, out of which 1.3 million were in emergency IPC 4.
The findings of the IPC remain worrying. It's a concern that more and more people need humanitarian assistance, and the situation will worsen further with expected returnees. This food security situation is dire, mainly because of livelihoods have been compromised and assets depleted over time.
Since the 10th Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo in August last year, more than 800 people have been infected with the virus. This continued outbreak has become the second largest epidemic in the 43-year history of humanity's fight against the deadly virus. Let's take a look.
February 21st at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The African Center for Disease Control and Prevention and the World Health Organization discussed latest developments in Ebola virus vaccines and drugs, as well as prevention and treatment.
As of yesterday, we recorded 848 cases in DRC, including 529 deaths of Ebola. This includes confirmed and probable cases.
According to the World Health Organization, the mortality rate of the Ebola virus infection in DRC has reached 62%. Women and children account for a very high proportion of the epidemic. UNICEF statistics say 59% of confirmed and suspected cases are currently reported. For children under 5, about 30% of cases are reported. The WHO says the security situation remains the biggest challenge in fighting the epidemic.
The security situation is very challenging. When you look at North Kivu, over the past 20 years, I've been seeing this armed conflict and population being terrorized by armed groups. So there are areas that are very difficult to access, and we are obliged to work under very restrictive security, measures, including using escort to access to certain areas. And it's very challenging for our teams. But we are committed to protect the population, so we use all necessary means to access to where the virus is, and we'll continue to do that until the outbreak is over.
Since the Ebola outbreak in 2018, the epidemic in the Kivu region of the DRC has gradually shifted from remote villages to densely populated cities such as Beni and Butembo. For various economic and personal reasons, the uncontrollable population movements have brought greater challenges to control.
The China government has deployed experts in neighboring countries, in Uganda and other countries there, where it's very important that we not just focus in the DRC, but we also focus in the neighboring countries, just in case that is the virus escape. We should be able to quickly detect it and stop it there. So the Chinese government have contributed significantly there, especially in Uganda.
He says the Chinese government has made a huge contribution in trying to respond to the spread of the Ebola outbreak. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
Let's go to Kenya now, where a court has postponed the decision to rule on the penal code that criminalizes same-sex relationships. Members of the LGBTI community in Kenya expected the ruling would finally ensure they are able to enjoy total rights and provisions availed to the greater population. In Kenya, homosexuality is taboo and same-sex acts are punishable under Kenya's penal code by up to 14 years in jail. The sitting judge cited a backlog in court cases, conflicting schedules and sensitivity of the case as reasons for the postponement. The ruling has been pushed to May 24th. Pro-gay groups want sections of the Kenyan penal code that criminalizes gay sex scrapped.
We have had a few challenges, and we are not blaming anyone for that reason. One of our colleagues is still on leave. He has had to sacrifice a number of days of his leave. One of our colleagues is outside Nairobi. She has had to sacrifice her time to come here, get us together. They have asked me to ask you give us up to May.
We were so excited today to have the judgment because it would have carved the path and the way forward for us to keep on advocating for the rights of the LGBTI community, and in particular to ensure that the healthcare system advances and factors in and targets MSM, and that is men who have sex with men, who is the main population that is harshly affected by this law.
This delay basically just means continuation of work. We have more time to do more education, we have more time to do more sensitization, and we have more time to share with the Kenyan people who we are. Because we are first of all Kenyans, we are people's sisters, people's mothers, people's brothers.
You cannot oppress this particular group of people, LGBTQ individuals in Kenya anymore.
Well, staying with the story, CGTN's Asta Tal looks at the contentious issues around the law and why it has attracted so much attention.
It's a colonial law imposed nearly 89 years ago. But today, it has very real consequences for Kenya's LGBTI community. Section 162 of the country's penal code makes it illegal to engage in any same-sex relations. Felix Kasanda, a high-profile activist, waited with anticipation to hear the court's ruling on a motion to repeal the law. The court postponed their decision until May 24th. A few more months for Felix to wait.
LGBTI community are living in Kenya like refugees. We don't live here as Kenyans because we can't access any human right. As a gay person in Kenya, you can't, unless you hide your sexuality.
LGBTI community members face discrimination and also blackmail in Kenya. Felix was expelled from school, rejected by his family and employers for being openly gay. Campaigners argue Section 182 violates Kenya's 2010 Constitution. The progressive Constitution guarantees equality, dignity, and privacy for all citizens. But in a conservative society like Kenya, views are split on the matter.
Should it be legalized? I don't think it should be legalized. However, people are free to do whatever they want. It's their life. But again, we don't want to impose it on the law. And we, as Kenya, we are a godly nation. So we want to follow the natural order of things, the way they were placed.
I think, why should we agree to polygamy, then we don't agree to the same sex? You see, it doesn't make sense. So I think they should allow same-sex marriages.
Activists hope by repealing the law, LGBTI members can live more freely, still facing prejudice, but ending the fear of arrest and blackmail. Asta Tal, CGTN.
And on to Uganda now, where Parliament has passed a new bill that could see wildlife traffickers jailed for life if found guilty. The bill replaces the old wildlife law that conservationists say was not punitive enough. Isabel Nakiria reports.
Uganda is weighing in on the illegal wildlife trade. Offenders will either pay a fine of about $500,000 or spend the rest of their life in jail. Conservationists say this will help curb escalating levels of trafficking.
It sends out a strong message to someone who wants to poach. It sends out a strong message to those people who are looking at Uganda as a transit route for illegal wildlife trade. It's not going to be business as usual.
Under the old law, offenders would pay up to $300 in fines or face a 3-year jail term. Uganda is used as a transit route for illegal wildlife trophies because of the weak laws. Recently, enforcement teams impounded 3 shipping containers of ivory and pangolin scales, the biggest catch in history so far.
As a country, we are at least able to account for the wildlife that we have. For example, I can say that in the last 1 year, we know we have lost 2 elephants whose ivory we couldn't get. But if you saw the ivory that was impounded, it was a lot, meaning that most of it comes from outside Uganda.
Elephant numbers in Uganda are slowly recovering at about 6% annually, and the government is guarding these endangered species. Authorities are now moving to tighten enforcement at all border crossings.
We have deployed our enforcement officers along the borders. We have established strategic tactical checkpoints at different points. We toured the whole of Lake Albert, which used to be a very porous area, and we are continuing to beef up. So we have established a strong intelligence network on the ground.
Conservation agencies say the growing demand for ivory from Asian countries is making trafficking wildlife products very lucrative. The new wildlife bill will have to be assented to by the president before it becomes law. For now, though, conservationists are relieved that this will help bring an end to illegal wildlife trade. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala.
Your business news now with Uche.
Thanks, Lindy. And coming up on Africa Live Biz, Zimbabwe's central bank governor under fire for exchanging exporters' US dollar earnings. And lawmakers block a merger between Kenya Airways and Kenyan Airports Authority.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads, where opportunity meets innovation, where profitable new markets collide with global trends. From the sound of an African bell on a stock market's floor, to the shout of a trader in a bustling free market. It's colorful, vibrant, and exotic. CGTN stands at the gateway to Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. From Morocco to South Africa, we talk to the deal makers and actors who fuel its engines of growth. Only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off the show in Tunisia. The Federation of African National Insurance Companies is holding its General Assembly in the capital, Tunis. Now, the association, headquartered in Dakar, brings together about 214 member companies from about 29 African countries. Over 1,000 participants are expected to discuss the future of the insurance industry. Here is more on that story.
The Federation of African National Insurance Companies, FANAF, is holding its 43rd Annual General Assembly for the first time in Tunisia on the theme, What Market Structure to Promote the Development of African Insurance.
This high-level event conference is a good opportunity to exchange productive ideas and experiences in order to encourage business exchanges between the different actors in this industry.
FANAF holds every year on the sidelines of its ordinary General Assembly a symposium to maintain reflection and exchanges on topical issues of the insurance industry.
After the 2018 edition in Kigali, Rwanda, which invited delegates to rethink African insurance in the face of disruptions, the 2019 General Assembly will remain in the continuity of reflection. The theme we are discussing in Tunis is the subject of 4 major panels that will involve specialists from all 27 African countries.
Tunisian Finance Minister declared that the bill on the Code of Insurances will be presented to the cabinet next March. Rida Shalhoum indicated that this new bill aims to adapt the legal framework of the insurance sector to international standards.
Our goal is to promote the competitiveness of insurance companies, which play an important role in the mobilization of national savings. An in-depth reform program is being implemented after completion of an actuarial study to improve business competitiveness and boost productivity in the insurance sector.
Experts stress the need for the African continent to work together to reinforce the various aspects of cooperation and coordination between insurance companies and reinsurers, regulators, and professional organizations. According to FANAF delegates, joint African action will undoubtedly contribute to the development of lasting bilateral relations between African insurers and reinsurers. It will also improve cooperation and sharing of expertise. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And in Zimbabwe, the governor of the Reserve Bank, Dr. John Mangudia, has admitted that he showed prejudice to exporters by taking their money at an unfavorable rate when the parallel markets were at about 400% premium. Now, the Southern African state's bond note was set at a ratio of 1-to-1 with the US dollar back in 2016 when it was introduced. The governor's self-incrimination follows the bank's introduction of a new currency known as the RTGS dollars in an attempt to ease the nation's cash crunch crisis. The new currency is expected to begin trading at around 2.5 to the US dollar as, of course, banks reopen in the country. And in South Africa, the country may not be able to escape a credit ratings downgrade any longer. The national budget was recently unveiled in Parliament, revealing a growing debt burden, while international ratings agencies have issued several warnings about low growth in the country, as well as high unemployment and growing debt. Here's Sumitra Naidu with more from Cape Town.
Treasury officials met with Moody's early Thursday, a day after the national budget was delivered. Finance Minister Tito Mboweni and his team did what they could.
It's a budget which has been constructed under difficult circumstances.
The more we dig into his speech, it's actually much more positive. So what we'll actually be telling our investors is that there are bold steps that have been taken, particularly in a year when one would actually have expected some populist gestures, given that we're going into an election year.
It really didn't achieve very much. Bold statements were made about the public sector wage bill not being sustainable, but then he goes and tinkers with that and doesn't really take any bold steps to reduce the public sector wage bill.
Under the conditions through which the country is going through because of the economic climate, yes, one has to get satisfied.
Eskom, which is constantly bailed out by the government, received another 3-year allocation of $5 billion.
It is an important support for one of our key pillars of our turnaround, being the cost containment. We now need to focus on cost and on revenue because this goes into debt servicing. It's about 65% of what we need.
It's an economic quagmire. Years of bailing out badly run state-owned entities have taken their toll. Debt to GDP is over 55%. The deficit has pushed to 4.5%, not ideal in a low-growth economy.
It was a tough budget for Finance Minister Tito Mboweni, but he made all the right noises. He was also frank about the financial burden of state-owned enterprises. He announced a raft of measures to get this economy back on track, but there's a growing consensus that these measures have come a little too late to avoid a ratings downgrade.
If you look at the language from Moody's over the last 2 or 3 months, it's definitely a different picture from last year, and they were very clear that the situation has worsened. I don't think it's us falling off a cliff and the financial situation deteriorating inevitably, but we're kind of in that point where we need to make the turn and things are going to get a little bit worse before they get better.
Out of the 3 international credit rating agencies, only Moody's has South Africa at investment grade. If it decides to downgrade, South Africa will immediately be kicked off the World Global Bond Index. Capital costs will rise and the rand will weaken. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
And legislators in Kenya have suspended a proposed merger between the East African country's state-owned airline, Kenya Airways, and the Kenyan Airports Authority. Now, this leaves the cash-strapped national carrier in a deep financial crisis. The National Assembly's Public Investments Committee ordered an immediate halt to the process, even as it called for a forensic audit by the Office of the Auditor General on how the deal was reached. Well, Kenya Airways is currently drowning in in debt and account for about 83% of Kenyan Airports Authority's revenues, as well as 51% of its recurrent expenditure. And in Nigeria, the advisory power team at the office of the vice president says the nation's power sector has lost about $191 million between January 1st and February 19th this year. And that's due to the persistent challenges in the industry. Now, APT says the loss was due to insufficient gas supply to power generation plants, as well as inadequate distribution and transmission infrastructure. Now, the data shows that a total of 2,333 megawatts of electricity was not produced due to the deficiency of gas on February 19th. Now, the data further shows that 32.5 megawatts of power was not produced as a result of the unavailability of transmission infrastructure, while about 543 megawatts was not produced due to high frequency as a result of the scarcity of distribution infrastructure. And to Egypt now, the country has hosted this year's solar and wind exhibition in the capital, Cairo. The event brings together key stakeholders in the solar energy industry from different countries. It is dedicated at advancing the renewable energy sectors across the MENA region. Here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim.
For the last few years, Egypt has been tapping the solar energy sector as an alternative to the more expensive fuel energy. And the solar show in Cairo has brought together companies that are interested in investing in the North African country.
I think Egypt is a great market for solar energy because of many reasons. Firstly, Egypt has a very good sun, very good night resources. Secondly, and the price of the solar energy has dropped, and also, but for the traditional energy and has been increased a lot in Egypt. So it is the right moment to introduce the solar energy into Egypt.
Local and international companies are showcasing their products, including Chinese manufacturers who have a strong presence at the show.
We are the biggest polysilicon manufacturer in the world, and we are the fifth biggest PV module supplier in the world. We are the biggest non-state-owned investor, PV module investor in the world. The target of our technology is to reduce the cost of this material, to provide our value, more additional value to this industry development.
The government has recently offered incentives for solar power companies that includes a favorable pricing mechanism.
Very fair regulation and an investment atmosphere which will create the attraction for the investors from abroad, for them to come with confidence to your lovely country. We love Egypt, by the way, as Turkish people. We like being here. So the investors need stability in economy, in politics, to come and invest.
The largest solar panel farm in the world was inaugurated last year in Aswan, Upper Egypt, producing 1,425 megawatts. The government hopes to reach an output of 1.8 gigawatt from the solar power by 2020 and cover 25% of the electricity grid by 2022. With the huge potential in solar power and the latest discoveries in natural gas, the government hopes it has managed to guarantee a sustainable and cheap source of energy for decades to come. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up on Global Business Africa, we'll tell you what to expect from the upcoming EU-Arab League Summit, which is happening in Egypt's Sharm el-Sheikh over the weekend. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. Well, let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Coming up, the seal from Antarctica that's causing a stir in South Africa.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice. Let's start in South Africa now, where a southern elephant seal thought to be from Antarctica crossed more than 6,500 kilometers of sea and made Fishhook in Cape Town its a temporary home. Many are descending onto the beach to have a closer look at the Antarctic creature. Here's CGTN's Travis Andrews with more.
Summer season is in full swing, and this Antarctic visitor seems to be taking full advantage of it. For this southern elephant seal, even the Cape's warm waters must seem like bliss. The animal has made a nesting area for itself on Fishhook Beach, which is popular with locals and tourists, and many are descending on it to get a closer look at the rare creature. It's not the first time that this seal, known as Buffel, has visited these shores though, and is known to scientists who have tagged it before. Even so, its annual trip has sparked the curiosity of the masses.
It's not very often that the elephant seals come to South Africa. They're very rare in South Africa. Well, I mean, as I've heard, this one's basically been in the Cape Town area since 2014, but he's been showing up at various beaches, like unpredictably. Last season he was at Dacre Island for about 3 months. But still, it's a very rare animal in South Africa, so it's a very valuable opportunity to get, if you're into wildlife, if you're into animals, to come and see this seal. He's quite special. It's quite great, yeah.
Buffel is currently molting and will replenish his fur in around a month. Until then, he'll spend most of his time on the beach, with the occasional dash off to cool off in the water. Some curious onlookers have also gotten a tad too close between Buffel and the sea, and he's made that abundantly clear. Even so, it's not every day an animal usually seen in science books ends up at the local beach. Cape Townians are quite used to seals. There's a large Cape fur seal colony just down this beach. But when it's a visitor from Antarctica, it's another story altogether.
I have not seen this before in 60 years, so it's a first for us and very special to see nature in this way. And I'm particularly interested to see how his skin is actually molting and coming off. A couple of days ago it was just a little bit around his nose, and now it's a whole lot more.
It's really the first time that I've seen this thing on the beach. I just read the sheet now, what it's about. It's busy shedding its skin, and it will be staying on the beach for maybe 3 to 4 weeks, and people might just give it space so that nature can take its course.
So the spectator and educational values of the seal's visit are quite high, and for the moment Buffel will continue to molt until it departs on its long journey back home. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
While staying in South Africa, multi-award-winning music group Soweto Gospel Choir are celebrating after scooping yet another Grammy. The group, which started in 2002, walked away with the award for Best World Music Album for their album Freedom. It was released in June last year to commemorate Nelson Mandela's centenary birthday.
Hailing from South Africa's most famous township, the Soweto Gospel Choir brings unique and inspirational sounds of African music to the global stage. It was a special moment when the group took the Grammy for Best World Music Album for Freedom.
It was exciting and scary at the same time, just because you can imagine waiting for your name to be called. So, yeah, it was stressful, nervous, but the minute we call our choir, our name, we screamed. We forgot that there's everyone next to us. But it was so exciting and we were so happy.
I still can't believe it.
I still pinch myself every single time, knowing that we have won such a magnificent accolade. It's because it carries a lot of weight. The album was produced to commemorate Nelson Mandela and, of course, to celebrate other fallen heroes and unsung heroes.
The group was formed in 2002. It has performed before statesmen and celebrities across the world and sang alongside musical greats and been showered with a string of awards in its 17-year history. Last year, the choir performed with Beyoncé at the Global Citizen Festival.
Joining the choir was like a dream come true because I could travel, could see the world, I could do collaborations with artists as well. And a Grammy it was like a cherry on top.
The choir has just returned from a tour to the US and are already hard at work preparing for their next gig.
Since we won the Grammy, everyone wants the piece of Soweto Gospel Choir. Everyone, like every artist, wants to collaborate with Soweto Gospel Choir because of they're good. So it's more jobs, hopefully, and just want to travel the world and give them the best of South Africa.
When you listen to this powerful harmony of voices, it evokes the deepest emotions. And there's no doubt why the Soweto Gospel Choir continues to rack up music's most coveted accolade. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And coming up in your sports news, up next.